Hello, 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 hello. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about limiting beliefs, things that hold you back. So I'm going to talk about three main things. I'm going to talk about the beliefs, first of all, and also I'm going to talk about removing mental blocks. And then I'm going to talk about your mental state and how that aligns with it all. And once I've talked about that, I'm going to just finish on a point where we get to so we can identify and think about limiting beliefs. And then next week, next time, I'll talk about removing them. So limiting beliefs, then, they can be all kinds of doubts. They can be tied in with anxieties, what ifs, general unease. It's almost the feeling that something is impossible or very difficult. Think about this. Lots of psychologists are coming round to the idea that our default setting, our factory setting, if you like, is to be happy and content and at ease. And what we do as we go through life, we sort of put on a veil, and the veil starts to kind of cover up that happiness, that contentedness, and that feeling of at ease. And it starts to get heavier and heavier. And what we're going to try and do is peel away the veil so that the person underneath, who is a happy person with feelings of can-do, is revealed. So one of the things that I like to talk about and some of the workshops I do and some of the clinics and so on is Roger Bannister, which is a little bit disconnected from what I do a lot of the time, which is to talk to equestrians. And the reason I talk about Roger Bannister is that, as most people will know, he was the first sub 4-minute mile runner. It's difficult for us in the 21st century, especially those of us that weren't around, to think about what society thought of in 1954, the year of the sub 4-minute mile. So in those days, people were absolutely convinced, and this is doctors, this is physiologists, this is the athletes themselves and sports fans, coaches. All those people thought that running underneath the 4-minute barrier was humanly impossible. We just weren't designed to run that fast. We just couldn't do it. There wouldn't ever be a human being that could go that fast over a mile. And it's strange, isn't it, to think now, because we're so used to watching sports on television and seeing world records and seasons bests and personal bests being smashed all the time. So in the 1950s, when it was thought to be impossible and a pipe dream to run this fast, then along came Roger Bannister, because he really thought that he could do it. And he was going against all the expert opinions. And when he did, on that fateful day, run the 4-minute mile, or sub 4 minutes, 3:59.4 seconds, so not like massively crashing through the barrier, but nevertheless less than 4 minutes. When he did that, it did something to not only the national psyche, but internationally as well. Suddenly the floodgates opened and people began to think that it'd be easier, it would be relatively easy to go faster. We got through that hurdle, that barrier. And later on in that same year, a man called John Landy beat Bannister's record. And then later on in the same year, Bannister went and broke that record. And suddenly the records were tumbling. So those limiting beliefs that were held by so many people from all different walks of life, from experts to amateurs, suddenly came crashing down. And it's called the Bannister effect because of that. So we have to think about, for us, what is our banister effect going to be? What's the thing that when we remove it, when we stop thinking in that way, when we maybe identify what's holding us back and we have a good think about how to stop thinking like that, what our floodgates will be, what our banister effect will be. So the second thing I want you to think about is perhaps other kinds of mental blocks that are more personal. So for instance, insurmountable problems, things that you believe you really can't do. But if you ask somebody else, they would say, yeah, you can. If you asked your best friend or a family member. So these are things that are true to us. They feel right, they feel firm, but other people might argue against us and say that we could do these things. I want you to think about horse riders. Now, it doesn't matter if you're a horse rider or not, because you'll understand the problem that sometimes people come to me with. I'm thinking about people who like to jump horses, and very often they have a height that they can't get over, in their mind, of course. So let's say the height that they've got the block on is 3 feet. Just pick a number. So they'll often say things like 2'9". Yeah, that's fine. Absolutely fine. And if they look at a photograph or a video of themselves doing a 2'9" jump, they'll notice that the horse is actually well clearing 3 feet anyway, because the horse has been nice and careful. So what is it about this number that they've got inside their head that they can't get past? And, you know, sometimes just thinking about the problem completely differently, rather than hammering away and saying, of course you can do it, look at this photo, you're actually doing it, it's just that the pole was 2'9". Rather than hammering away, sometimes it's really useful to rethink it in a completely different way. So sometimes I say to people like that, okay, so 3 feet is what you want to jump, 3 feet is the sticking point. How would it be if, rather than jumping vertically, you were going horizontally? So you're going horizontally 3 feet. Would that be okay? And most riders will kind of think, well, actually 3 feet to a horse is not that much to go crossways. And I'm not talking about this thing having any height, it's flat on the floor. So it's like a long jump instead of a high jump. And sometimes those kind of things, saying, well, you're still jumping 3 feet, you said you can't jump 3 feet. Sometimes the thinking outside the box a little bit like that can just make it feel slightly different and loosen up the limiting belief enough for it to start to break down. It's enough for it to be questioned. It's enough for the possibility to come in. And that's what we want. That's how the limiting beliefs get broken down, because possibility kind of enters, and people are starting then to question themselves, and why have I always thought like that, when it's possible that, you know, something else could happen. So it's it's a change in perception to shake up the fear or shake up whatever limiting belief it is. The third thing I'm going to talk about is mental state. Okay, because sometimes that can just help, again, to shake up a problem. So I'm thinking about your emotional state, your mental state, maybe your physiology. And physiology in NLP really means how you're holding yourself, what you're doing with your face, what you're doing with your breathing. And I want you to think about that feeling of that could be captured from any memory. Doesn't have to be linked to the limiting belief at all. I want you to think about when you feel like you're in the zone, or things are just flowing and things are just easy. Maybe there's a certain feeling of being at one with something or someone or the situation. Just have a think about it. And if that's difficult to think about, you can always think about it a little bit later. But when you do that, when you start thinking about that oneness, if you like, that in the zone, and it could be something really simple like watching television or, you know, reading a book. It doesn't have to be something phenomenal that you're up to. It's an activity where you just feel focused, calm, it's easy, you know, those kind of feelings. And when you think about that, I want you to think about, what does it feel like, not only sort of inside your head and a little bit inside your body, but, you know, how are you holding yourself? Is your spine kind of upright, or are you a little bit slumped and more relaxed? And are your shoulders kind of back, or are they forwards? And how are you breathing? Are you breathing nice and slowly or regularly? And is your in-breath the same length of time as your out-breath? Or are they different? So as long as you are thinking about how you are, what you're saying inside your head, how connected you feel to the activity, or if you're with another person, or maybe a horse or something, how connected do you feel? And do that till you feel that sense of familiarity with it. As I say, you don't have to pick a situation where you're doing something profound. It could be just something that comes very easy, like sitting in a chair watching television. And in this state that, you know, is so much of ease, there's no push, there's no pull, you don't need to grasp it and hold on to it. You don't need to think about what happened before or what's going to happen after. You're just kind of in the moment and it's easy. And you're just kind of surrendering control in a way, because it's just kind of ease and flow. And you're just enjoying the stillness. And this state that you're in, when you recapture this and you think very clearly about how you're holding your body and your breath, what your face is doing. Maybe you're smiling, but maybe you're so relaxed you're not actually smiling. Maybe your eyes are a little bit defocused. When you've got that, when you've captured that stillness, that flow, then this is the kind of flow and zone, if you like, that you need to be in when you are experiencing success in something. And I'm going to work more next time with this kind of feeling. But having this feeling is what we're trying to achieve when we're talking about limiting beliefs. Because that kind of thing allows us to think about in an easier way, to allow inspiration and allow good, positive thought processes in. I want to just think about when you're planting the suggestion that maybe we have got these limiting things that hold us back, these blocks, these barriers. I want to just think about how they get established, because that can also help us sometimes to break it down. Because if it's come from a long time ago, when we were quite a different person, let's say, then sometimes that helps to break them down. So we mentioned the default or the factory setting for us. So when we're children, very young children, that's how we are kind of born. We're born to be happy and content and for things to flow easily. And if you think about a baby or a toddler, you know, their limiting beliefs take a few years to establish, and they come from the parents or they come from people that are around them. And whilst they're, you know, so young that they're in prams and so on, they're not too worried that their blankets maybe don't match and the pram isn't like the bestseller, or that whatever they're dressed in isn't the most in vogue outfit going. They don't worry about things like that. The hang-ups that you develop and end up as limiting beliefs come later, come from things that you pick up on. You pick up on the way people react, things that they say, things that they do, and you make these little thoughts in your head that start off as a tiny idea. And these ideas can occur to us any time of life, but your first limiting beliefs will have come as a child. So a limiting belief can develop anytime, in 5 minutes time even. You don't have to have been a youngster to have picked these up. So we have a fleeting idea, and all of a sudden it happens again, or we're in a similar situation. So there's like a repeat, there's like a trigger. And what was just a fleeting thought and it went out of your mind, you get reminded of it. And then maybe it happens a third time and a fourth time. And your mind says to you, very unconsciously, very out of your awareness, okay, this has happened a few times now. Do you want to make this into a belief? And it is the fork in the road. So it is, do we have enough evidence to call this a belief? Or shall we just ignore it? It's fluke or freak, or, you know, we've not got enough evidence. And if you choose then to have it as a limiting belief, just like any other belief, it won't feel any different. It will start to get established. The difference with a limiting belief and a more positive, helpful belief is obviously that this is going to hold you back. It's going to be a barrier to you doing possibly what you want to do in the future. And you might remember some of them from childhood. You might remember the time someone told you that you couldn't do something, and maybe you defied them. Maybe you did it in spite of what they said. Maybe you were told you couldn't climb that tree and you did it. Maybe you were told you couldn't do something. You know, when I was really young, my grandma told me I couldn't sing. And she was probably right, but it had a profound effect on me at that time. I used to sing a lot, an awful lot. My cousin owned a hairdresser's and I would sing my head off on a Saturday morning in the hairdresser's. I thought I was being entertaining. People probably smiling at the non-tuneful songs that were coming out of my mouth. But then my grandma heard me and she said, you know what, you cannot sing. You are tone deaf. I was probably about 3 or 4 years old, and it stayed with me all that time. Now, it doesn't really matter in my everyday life anymore because I don't really care whether I'm in tune or not. But, you know, these things do kind of mount up in your mind, and things that are more serious in nature than whether you can sing or not. So what I'm going to talk about next week is, once we've thought about our limiting beliefs, and some of them, as I say, may be deep and buried and you don't even know they're there, and we'll talk about those as well. Have a little think about your limiting beliefs. Have a little think about that very still in the zone that we want to create, because we'll use that next week. And we'll use those kind of thoughts to get rid of at least one of your limiting beliefs. So, limiting beliefs, not nice things to have. Very, very limiting, as the name suggests. Very, very sort of a little bit insidious because they're there, but you might not know they're there. But let's get rid of them and start to break through the barriers a little bit next week. So I'll see you all next week. Take care for now. Bye.